Alright, so Berserk is officially back with chapters 365 and 366. Before the chapter starts, however, we have a nice colored page with Guts and Puck, and I really love this. The colors are nice and vibrant. There's a nice contrasting effect with the darkness of Guts and the brightness and the vibrancy of Puck, so absolutely fantastic. Love this. Now the chapter starts off with Puck flying through the sky, and it's a nice shot of the moon and the night sky and of Elfhelm, so really nicely done. Then, in an instant, Puck and the Marrow and the various magical entities on the island sense an unknown presence. We then see Shirka's perspective of the situation of when Casca is stepping outside to look at Guts and Griffith. We then see a nice panel of Griffith, and I will say this looks considerably better than the image that I looked at of the image leaks. So it looks like it was maybe touched up a bit. Maybe what we saw in the image leaks was a bit of a rough draft, so it was a little bit rough. It wasn't as refined, but this looks a bit better, so I do enjoy this image. Casca's brand then begins to bleed as her memories flood back into her consciousness. And this panel of her clutching her own heart evokes a lot of emotion and captures the emotional pain and turmoil that she went through in these past years, all coming to the surface at once. So absolutely love that cathartic moment. Really well done. And then this chapter ends with Guts growling like a wild beast as Griffith placidly watches him. So, you know, you're on the edge of your seat. You're like, what's going to happen next? And then we go to the next chapter, and obviously the next chapter starts off with Guts saying Griffith, as he said so many times before. And you could just see the absolute anger and vitriol. And I absolutely love this panel, guys. Then he swings his sword through Griffith's body, but surprisingly, nothing happens. Griffith remains unharmed. But undeterred, he tries again, slicing through his head this time, but once again, it has no effect. It's kind of interesting, actually. It almost seems as if Griffith's body is ethereal, as if it doesn't exist in the physical realm. So we can see the body in the physical realm, but it doesn't seem to have any sort of tangibility. It almost seems as if he's a ghost, as it were, or some sort of angelic being. So does this mean that even though because he was reborn in the physical realm, he's still not a physical being? He's kind of a half physical being, half ethereal being? Not really sure at the moment. Kind of a little bit weird. I guess we're gonna need an explanation for that. Maybe Donan will have an explanation. Maybe Skull Knight will have an explanation. Who knows? But a lot of mystery at the moment. And then moving forward, we see Griffith turning his face towards Guts. And this is a very nice panel here. Really well drawn. Absolutely love this one. And then the Black Swordsman absolutely loses it. And it's kind of funny because he starts laughing, you know, the kind of laugh you would expect from someone who's like losing their mind and going a little bit crazy. Kind of that Joker laugh, like you just can't believe how fucked up the situation is, and you're like, what the hell? And then he starts swinging his sword wildly at Griffith, just swinging through his body, just hoping that one strike will draw some blood, that one strike will kill him, that one strike will do something. But then Shirka senses something and says, could it be? And then before finishing the statement, Farnese interrupts her. Shirka then says it's a maelstrom, a force which draws in and swallows everything around it. We then see Farnese holding Casca as Shirka asks Guts what's going on. Shirka then senses something that flies by Puck into Elfhelm. And before you know it, we see a familiar, monstrous paw reaching down for Guts. Guts dodges at the last moment, but he now stares down a familiar foe, and it's none other than Nosferatu Zod. And the chapter ends with the phrase, a wedge has formed on the sacred island, and a torrent of darkness is flooding in. Now, first off, what an amazing action-packed pair of chapters. Absolutely love them. I was on the edge of my seat. I talked about in the chapter leaks that I was a little bit disappointed by some of the panels. some of the artistry wasn't as good as Mira's, but I will say, guys, after seeing the full and complete chapters, I am satisfied. I did love a lot of the panels, so even though there's a few gripes here and there, for the most part, I'm very much happy, and I loved the action. It's a bit interesting because there wasn't a lot of dialogue in these chapters, and I was kind of expecting that maybe Guts would have tempered his rage a bit, maybe he would have tried talking to Griffith, but we didn't really get any of that, so it was kind of interesting. Especially with all that's gone on Elfhelm, Guts seems to have turned a corner. He seems to have sort of tempered his rage, but I guess the fact that Casca sort of lost it there and she was kind of having that emotional outbreak sort of set Guts off, and he didn't sort of logically process the situation. He sort of just went for it. It's also interesting too because he just saw the Moonlight Boy transform into Griffith. You would have thought that maybe he would have had some trepidation. Maybe he would have had some reservation in attacking Griffith, but I guess that rage for Griffith is so intense that he just can't even think. He just goes into this form where he's just acting like a beast and he lets all his rage sort of flood out of his body. I guess the Beast of Darkness is probably controlling him as well, so that's also a factor. Now, there's a lot of questions ending with this chapter, and some of them being, will Guts and Zod have their third battle? Now, we know their first battle happened in the castle, their second battle happened on the Hill of Swords, so this would be their third battle. Now, they worked together at Virtanis Harbor, but that was a special situation in which they needed to take down Ganishka. So, it would be very interesting if they had their third battle. My next question is Griffith even killable at this point? I mean, the fact that Guts can even touch him is really shocking and really terrifying in a sense. Now, of course, Skull Knight has the Sword of Actuation, so we would think maybe it's possible, but we don't even know. I mean, Griffith has shown that he can distort space to the point where maybe he can't even be killed if he's aware and conscious. So maybe the only way to kill him is if he's the Moonlight Boy. But does Guts have the fortitude to kill his own child just so he can kill Griffith? I mean, now that he knows that Griffith and the Moonlight Boy are sharing the same body, maybe he'll tell Casca and the Skull Knights, hey, look, we gotta kill our own son if we want to kill Griffith. That would be a hell of a thing to say, but I wouldn't rule it out at this point. And then with Shirka's dialogue, when she was saying, someone's here, could it be? Now, was she referring to Zod? Was she sensing his presence? Or was she sensing Skull Knight's presence? Now, the reason I ask this is because the first time that Guts encountered the Skull Knight, he thought it was Zod. He mistook Skull Knight for Zod. Now, was Shirka doing the same thing? And does this kind of validate my theory in which they're kind of the same person? They were both King Geiseric, and then that personality got split asunder, and maybe part of that personality of Geiseric still lingers in both of them. And that's why they keep getting mistaken for each other. Who knows? And with Griffith and Zod together, will Skull Knight intervene at this point? Or will Don and Gedfring or any of the other mages intervene? You would think that they would want to protect Elfhelm, so I would imagine they're not just going to stay on the sidelines. I would imagine they're going to come in at some point, but in what capacity? It's hard to say. I mean, I gotta say, with the two chapters, there's certainly more questions than answers. Now, I will say this too, the chapters did fly by pretty quickly. Each chapter was 14 pages long, so, 2 chapters, 28 pages total, that's kind of the length of a chapter and a half, because most Berserk chapters are about 20 pages, so it wasn't really 2 chapters, it was about a chapter and a half. So the pace did feel a little bit quick. I know Koji Mori was talking about that he didn't want to add any superfluous details. He didn't want to expand upon details that weren't communicated to him by Kentaro Miura, so maybe they're just hitting the points that he remembers and they're not really adding on to that. I mean, that's good in a sense, but, maybe we're going to miss out on some details that we would have otherwise known about. Like, I wouldn't mind if he sort of added in details to sort of add to the situation so it made a little more sense, because it felt a little fast-paced to me. I mean, that being said, it was still very fun and it was still fantastic, but it almost felt like things need to be drawn out a little bit. So tell me what you guys think of these 2 chapters. I thought it was exhilarating, I thought it was fun, and I thought it was great. You know, a couple details with the art didn't sit well with me, but again, after seeing the full 2 chapters, I have no complaints, and yeah, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.